Welcome to this edition of Valor Media. This is episode number 82 for August 30th, 2021, and I'm your host, Mark Appenzeller. And you're joining me today for episode number 2 in a 3-part series that I kicked off 2 weeks ago. And if you listen to episode number 1, you'll know that I entitled this series Boulders. And I called it that because I wanted to talk about some of the obstacles that can lay in the path of nonprofits. Now, if you're a regular listener to Valor Media, you know that the episodes that we put into our Valor XL classification are ones that we target toward helping you to thrive in business. And for those, we try to keep them open-ended enough that they'll apply to pretty much any business scenario. It can be a medium-sized company, a small business, a church. But with this Boulder series, I really did want to specifically tailor it to nonprofits. Because when you get into a conversation about business practices, I think a lot of times nonprofits can kind of slip through the cracks. And I think one of the main reasons why that happens is because there are a lot of misconceptions and particularly misperceptions about nonprofits. And I feel like the misperception idea kind of falls onto two sides of the coin. I think there are external misperceptions and internal misperceptions about the way nonprofits operate. I think a lot of people don't even really draw a distinction between a for-profit and a nonprofit. And let's face it, at the end of the day, if your business is for-profit, the bottom line is for profit. You're out to make money. You're marketing a service or a product, and that's the idea. You're selling something. But with a nonprofit, the goal is never about making money. The goal is about serving other people. That can cover a really wide spectrum. That can be a social services agency. It can be a group of people that are working in some sort of a charitable trust, maybe doing something to restore or preserve a historical site. There are many, many different labels that can have nonprofit on them. But at the end of the day, it really does come back to doing something that is giving back, that's enriching the community, that's blessing others. One of the reasons why this is near and dear to me is because I work for a nonprofit. Valor Ministries is a 501c3 Christian charity. And so in all the years that I've worked here, I've seen us as an organization have to navigate through a lot of complexities. And I think there is a unique set of challenges that nonprofits have to grapple with. And what's tragic is a lot of them never do. And so many well-meaning people who really have a heart for serving others and dramatically impacting their community kind of weighed in over their heads. And I used Boulders as the title because the obstacles that nonprofits have to deal with are there. They look overwhelming. They don't have to be. And if you address them early on, you can get them out of your way. You can move on with whatever your mission and your deep purpose is. But sometimes I think enthusiasm and emotion can really overtake people. And as nonprofits are being developed, the boulders are never gotten out of the way. Sometimes they're never even noticed. And if you don't notice them and deal with them up front, at some point you will trip over them. So to look at things in the context of misperceptions, let's first of all talk about the external misperceptions of nonprofits. I think when outsiders look in at a nonprofit, truth be told, they don't really know what they're looking at. First of all, it probably looks really easy. And if the cause of the nonprofit is near and dear to the heart of the outside observer, that person will probably get caught up in the excitement and the emotion of it all. They will tend to look at things through rose-colored glasses and kind of a feel-good haze. And the problem with that is it's very disconnected from reality. behind the scenes, outside of the perspective of that outsider, the nonprofit might really be struggling to make ends meet. Many nonprofits have to find extremely creative ways to deal with very small budgets. And that is an overwhelming prospect for a lot of organizations, but an outsider won't necessarily see that. They'll see people coming together to do something noble, serving others, but an outsider will lose that real perspective of what it takes to simply show up at the office day after day and face whatever it is that needs to be done just to fulfill the basic mission that the organization committed to. On an even deeper level is the incredible challenge of trying to figure out how to fulfill the vision, not just the daily grind, but the long-term goals that the organization was put together to address. So people on the outside may make a financial contribution, they may do something to support in a minimal way, but they never really understand how much of a struggle can be going on behind the scenes. Now, amazing as it may seem, I think that there sometimes can be an even more damaging misperception that occurs internally with nonprofits. I have seen situations with some nonprofits where the leadership, maybe even the person who initially started the organization, is kind of suffering from that same rose-colored glasses, feel-good haze that I talked about. They're so caught up in the passion of what they want to do that they never really stop to figure out the nuts and bolts to support it. When I was growing up in the early 1970s, on hot summer afternoons, one of our favorite activities was to play office. Kids did that back then. That may sound incredibly dumb and archaic today, but long ago, in the days before social media, cell phones, and Netflix binge watching, if you could get your hands on some discarded items from your parents' job, it was incredibly exciting. We would throw together whatever we could find. This was pre-calculators, so maybe you had access to an old adding machine or an abacus or some other primitive tool. But kids would get together with whatever they could scrounge up, and if they had anything that remotely resembled office supplies, bingo, instant company. Now, if there was a more assertive kid, they would invariably become the manager or the boss, and the other kids were the employees. And you would sit there and just randomly hit keys on an adding machine or a beat-up old typewriter. You would use a hole punch or a letter opener, or if you were really lucky, a little rubber stamp pad that you could put urgent over everything in sight. And we would sit and do that hour after hour, and we accomplished amazing things in those make-believe companies. The unfortunate thing is, I've thought so many times years later, some nonprofits kind of wind up playing office just like we used to. They'll do everything that they need to do to meet local municipal codes and tax obligations, but when it comes to really structuring how they put their business together, they're kind of like we were so long ago, just enjoying what we had and kind of making believe that we knew what we were doing. I don't fault anybody for that, but I think that's one of the biggest boulders. Because some nonprofits, because they're so focused on the passion of the vision and the mission, fail to put just basic business practices into place. Now, it can seem daunting, particularly if the individual who founded the nonprofit doesn't have a business background. But I think that's one of the difficulties too, because some people caught up in their own vision may not necessarily have the administrative or business abilities to really structure things in the way that they need to. And that's okay. We can't all do and be everything, so why try? And for folks who are starting a nonprofit, if they recognize that maybe administrative things aren't their strong suit, then they need to actively seek out someone who excels in that area. That's really the secret to assembling a strong and thriving nonprofit. It's not about having one dynamo world beater who can do it all. It's about putting together a cohesive team of people who are each keenly aware of what their own strengths and weaknesses are. And from that, you develop a structure that really builds a good, solid framework for getting done whatever it is that you're trying to do. Now, this is one of the key components I want to share that to me is really a deal breaker for a lot of nonprofits, because sometimes people scoff at this whole idea, but I can't emphasize how critically important this is, nor can I correctly tell you just how significantly this has impacted what we've done at Valor. You have to create a proper business structure. Now, that can be a rub for some people, because again, they get caught up in the idea of doing whatever they're doing as a calling or a service or a ministry, and they do it to the extreme. It has to be a moderate balance. The serving other people thing is phenomenal, but that's only part of it. The other part is you are running a business. You have to look at things from that perspective, or you will trip over the boulder. You can't just do whatever feels right and expect that to be a long-term framework for success. Especially as you assemble a team of people around you. They can't read your mind. They can't react and respond the way you do. So you have to figure out collectively how to put things into a framework that people can understand. I always say the ultimate goal of anything that you do in creating business structure should be to establish something that enables you to carry out your processes consistently and repeatedly. There is nothing worse than just operating on your feelings and doing things one way on Tuesday and a completely different way on Friday. That makes any organization look ridiculous. Because again, like we talked about outside perception, if people from the outside see an organization that has this loose cannon approach, it won't look good and it won't bode well for the long-term success of that organization. Because client experience will vary so drastically, word of mouth will get around. If somebody has a great experience because they interacted with a particular staff member and someone else has a terrible experience because they got somebody different, that's catastrophic. Your organization needs to be structured so that it's never built around individual personalities or knowledge bases. One of the biggest detriments can be that a core group gets established to get an organization up and running, and then suddenly one of those key players is no longer there. Everything was in their head, so when they're gone, so is their brain. And it can be a very frantic and very debilitating experience for the rest of the organization. That's why it is absolutely paramount that things be documented in writing. I know it's tedious. I know it can be a pain, but you will save yourself so much grief in the long term if you really create step-by-step instruction for everything in your organization, for every role, for every assignment. And it needs to really be across a lot of different layers, because it starts way up there at that grandiose vision and mission, why you're doing what you're doing. But you have to figure out the day-to-day stuff as well. You have to have policies in your organization that govern why you're doing what you're doing. And out of those policies come the procedures, which is the how to do what you're doing. It can be a boulder in itself, a seemingly overwhelming obstacle, because there's a lot to figure out. A lot of organizations do a huge disservice to themselves because they get scared by facing all of that and making all those decisions and unraveling that gigantic ball of twine. And in the long run, they lose focus, they lose steam, they'll eventually lose staff, because people can't be expected long term to really plug in and commit to something that they don't understand. There's a market research firm called IDC, and back in 2016, they did a study of businesses at large, and they found that companies will lose 20 to 30% in revenue due to inefficiencies in how they structure things. Now, that's for-profit companies. That's where the bottom line really is the bottom line. It's all about making that money. It's much more complex and critically important in the world of nonprofits. In 2019, the National Center on Charitable Statistics discovered that 30% of nonprofits fail to exist after 10 years. And I think that's influenced by the same detriment that occurs for those for-profits. It's not having things working efficiently. And having this, we'll do it this way today and then we'll see how we feel next week, that will never work, or it won't work for long. So one of the biggest boulders to get out of the way is the inefficiency of not documenting and structuring how you do what you do. Maybe in your nonprofit, you find yourself trying to unravel something gigantic and you have no idea where to start. Valor can help. Over the years, we've developed an incredible knowledge base out of our own experiences, solving things that maybe initially looked overwhelming to us. And we want to be able to share that knowledge with others so that they can avoid some of the pitfalls we went through and get to their destination a lot sooner. If you find yourself in that position and you'd like to get some insight to help you figure out where to start your journey, please reach out to us at info@valorxl.com and someone from our team will get back in touch with you. We have a document called Taking Your Organization's Temperature. It's 30 statements about your organization. You'll go through and essentially rank how they apply. The results might be pretty surprising. It can be a real eye-opener and give you some incredibly focused insight in where you need to start in that giant project of unraveling things. We're also available to come in and give you direct hands-on assistance in documenting your processes and finding the most efficient and repeatable workflows to carry out whatever your particular mission is. To learn more about the services that we offer, you can visit us on Facebook at ValorXL or our website www.valorxl.com. If you have suggestions for topics that you would like us to discuss with you on installments of Valor Media, please reach out to us at media@thevalorcenter.org. And you can get a better perspective on what Valor is all about by visiting our website, www.thevalorcenter.org, or on Facebook at Valor Ministries. And if you are a nonprofit, there's a pretty high probability that one of your biggest struggles involves funding. Donations play a critical role, but sometimes the real core component is grants. Our executive director, Lori Riston, recently published an incredible, comprehensive course that can take you through all the twists and turns of identifying and writing relevant grants for your organization. It's called Face Your Fears, and this grants writing course answers all your questions. If that process seems overwhelming, don't let it stop you in your tracks. You can learn more about Face Your Fears at www.valorxl.com/training. The purpose of the Valor Media podcast is to enrich you in your business through our Valor XL episodes and in your personal life through our Crisis to Thriving episodes. So please like and subscribe to this podcast. We publish a new episode every Monday. If the Valor Media podcast is a benefit to you, would you consider benefiting us? Would you financially support us so that we can continue to bring you content and branch out into new directions? If so, you can make your tax-deductible donation securely online by going to www.thevalorcenter.org and click on the Donate button. Or you can send a check or money order to Valor Ministries, 324 East Antietam Street, Suite 104, Hagerstown, Maryland, 21740. I'd like to thank you for joining me today. In 2 weeks, I'll be bringing you the final installment in this Boulders series. But please come back next week when your host will be Lori Riston. Until then, remember this: you were made to thrive.